Hello and a wonderful good evening, everyone. This is Suzanne Knabe-Nicole from Police Science Doctor. Police Science Doctor, if you're not familiar with it, is the website where scientific research in the fields of criminology, policing, investigative psychology, forensic psychology, and all the other related fields are turned into something that practitioners in law enforcement, the officers on the ground, can actually use. So you will see, I think there's 30 videos now in the free video gallery that are all related to police science, investigative psychology, interviewing, offender profiling, geographic profiling, crime linkage, how to interview children, how to interview suspects for and victims in sexual offense cases. There's a lot of different things on there. So I try to cover a lot of different subjects. And I also do interviews with people who have a very good story to share or knowledge to share or who are experts in something. And today is such an evening. You're going to meet in a few minutes PC Andrew Harris, whom I've dubbed the most effective cop in the UK, because a new role that he's going to be speaking to us about that he took on last year actually managed to, with that role, he managed to single-handedly reduce crime by 71%. But we will get to that in a second. I want to tell you about a few other things. So obviously, you know that not very long ago, I did the rapid fire conference on behavioral science in policing, and it went down very well. It was fantastic feedback, and I'm going to hold another conference in a few months because it was fun. I love doing it, and I think you guys enjoyed it as well from what I've heard, and the speakers were really pleased to be part of it as well. So the conference was called Rapid Fire because it was actually short training sessions, 10-minute training sessions on a specific subject that introduces people to behavioral science. And what I've done is I took those training sessions, I transcribed them, and the actual text of those sessions is now available as an ebook, because I know that when you go to a conference, you listen to something, and even if it is really inspiring, even if it is not boring you to death or it's so abstract, you will never be able to use it in any way. Excuse me, you will you try and take notes, but you might lose those notes, or your notes are not very good, or once you take notes, you can't actually concentrate fully on the actual session anymore, and you basically lose a lot of content. So I didn't want that to happen. So what I did, I transcribed those sessions for you, and I put them all into an ebook, and you can get that ebook if you want. So this is what it looks like. I'm going to put the link to that in the comments. So wherever you're watching this, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, hopefully this comment will appear. Yep, they've all been posted. So you can just click on that link and you can get that ebook. If you're a subscriber, you will get a discounted version of the ebook. So it's only $11.99 anyway, but as a subscriber to the free Police Science Doctor email list, you get it for $9.99. So that's the first thing I want to tell you about. The next thing is that I'm planning another event. So next Thursday, that's 13th of May, 1 o'clock British Standard Time, which is going to be 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've got the Mental Health in Policing webinar, Global Issue Practical Solutions. Now, what I've been doing for that, excuse me, I've been speaking to a number of people, again, experts or people with something to share. And I've been recording short interviews. I'm going to show you snippets of those interviews. So we're going to talk about the state of mental health and policing, what the challenges are, what the problems are, where they come from perhaps, but also you're going to come away with some ideas of things you can try yourselves. So if there's something that somebody in Illinois is doing that you think is really useful, or somebody in New Zealand is doing that you think is really useful, I want you to be able to go back to your own force, speak to your supervisor and say, hey, this is something they're doing over there. Let's give that a try. And it's worked. We need to do something that works. We know now that suicide is the highest risk of death in serving police officers, and that's just not on. And we know that police officers are often not supported enough, or often not feeling supported enough in their own force. And again, that's not on. We need to change something about that. So hopefully this webinar will do something. You can register. It's a free event. I invite everyone to join. I'm putting the link to register into the comments here. So again, they should just show up, just click and register yourself, and you'll be a subscriber automatically. And once you're a subscriber, because you've registered for the mental health webinar, you'll get the discounted ebook link. Now, what was the next thing I wanted to tell you is the upcoming emergency stress pit stop course. So this is a course by an ex-police officer, ex-frontline officer, and she's become a life coach, and she's an accredited life coach, and she specializes in stress for frontline police officers and staff. Excuse me. this is what the course card basically looks like. So it's for you to do in your own time, very discreetly, very confidentially, and it will help you work through stress, get more balance in your life, and just sort out things that are impacting you at work, that are impacting you at home, that are making everything difficult for you. It doesn't have to be this way. So the person, Ginny, who's facilitating the course, she's the coach who's doing it. She has been to the worst places of life in herself, and she was close to suicide, and she went about everything the wrong way, and she's now offering the right way for people to do it. So that is this course, and the link to that is now in the comments as well. Right, so I think it's time to bring on my guest now. So we're going to speak to PC Andrew Harris, and it's about how to reduce crime on mental health wards. Let me just see if he's there, because I can't see his camera anymore. Okay, it says device is not connected. Your guest will need to connect the mic or cam before you can add them to the stream. I hope he does that very soon, because I'm needing to keep you entertained now until he comes back online. But, there's a first time for everything. So I spoke to Andrew a little while ago about mental health, and I found out that what he does, they created a role where, so he's working in Bedfordshire Police in the UK, and they had requests from the mental health facilities in the county for more support. So they were having a high crime rate. So that's assaults and incidents against patients and against staff at mental health wards. And there he is. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening.
So I'm just giving you a little bit of a backstory here. But obviously we'll go into a lot more detail about that. But essentially, it was the mental health service that asked for the police for support, and they created a role where you were initially brought in as the mental health crime investigator, but Andrew actually gave it his own spin, and he turned that around, and it became a very proactive role where he's actually not just investigating crimes that happen on mental health wards. He's actually on the mental health wards. He spends most of his time is on at two different locations, and he's a visible presence, and he's a very approachable person, and people actually come to him before problems start. But anyway, good evening and welcome properly now that everything is up and running, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Right, and thank you for your time today. So obviously, putting a lot of pressure on you. I call you the UK's most effective cop. Now, in your own words, let me just switch you over again. Can you still see that?
Yes.
In your own words, why did I call you that?
So as a little introduction, I've been a police officer for 12 years, well, over 12 years, coming on 13 years now. So I've been a frontline cop that entire time, most of all with the Metropolitan Police Service, and then I transferred over to Bedfordshire. And I've joined this. I saw this role being advertised, and I thought, actually, that's a brilliant role to do. And I foresaw lots of opportunities and possibilities. And what we found was that there was a real problem in mental health services, that there was an awful lot of violence on the wards, violence and aggression on the wards, and that violence and aggression was directed at both staff and service users, patients, and we weren't generating on the wards weren't generating the right kind of environment to promote the care and the treatment and the rehabilitation for service users. And also, they lacked a sense of safety on the wards, that staff were becoming anxious about coming onto the wards, that service users, because that sense of safety wasn't there, they couldn't engage fully with rehabilitative efforts of the NHS services. So there was a real challenge there. And just to give you an idea of, these are 2015, 2016 figures. Mental health services, their staff about 190 in every 1,000 staff is assaulted every single year. Now, if you compare that to the ambulance service, it's 54. If you compare that to general trust, it's 21 per 1,000. So, you know, it's almost 10 times higher than working in a normal hospital. So it was a big red flag when I was shown this data to say this is the kind of problem that we're facing on the wards. And when I looked at the police figures, we saw that there's no way that we've got all these assaults taking place, yet we've only got 144 crime reports, which includes the criminal damages and other miscellaneous offences. So it's also been thoroughly underreported to the police to highlight as a problem. And then when you dig into those police reports and look at the outcomes of those reports weren't going anywhere. They weren't being dealt with properly. And staff, when the police went to speak to the staff lacked the confidence that the report was going to go anywhere. So they thought, why make the report in the first place? So what has happened is we tried to generate the staff to report as much and as often as possible. And this increase in reporting, we actually increased the reporting. So 144 for the 12 months of 2019, we actually increased that to 340 for 10 months of 2020. So that was the jump in reporting that we got from the crime reports. What we also had to do is we also had to increase their reporting on their internal data systems as well to actually report. So when they don't have a crime, but there's an incident of aggression from a service user, to actually record that towards staff or towards another service user, and to build that data set to kind of see what kind of problem we have. And what we managed to do is, and I have to say, COVID kept on getting in the way throughout this process. But from the middle of the year, when we got those reports to where we think is the level of where they should be, we used that data to actually target when these incidents were happening. We used the data to actually go, right, we have a problem with the morning cigarette break for the patients. So let's actually put some more staff or more experienced staff on those times to actually help manage that. We also use the data in several other ways, but what we saw is, because we're targeting those hotspot times, because the visible presence of myself constantly engaging with the service users, we saw that line come down, that offending come down. And to give you the figures, in July we had 52 offences. August that went to 37. September it went to 32, October it went to 22, November it went back up again to 26, but then in December, which is supposed to be a big spike in assaults on the wards, aggression on the wards, it was down to 15%. So from July down to December, we've actually dropped 71% in offending in 6 months' time. So that's why you've called me UK's most effective cop. I don't really identify with that, but I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Well, blame me for it. You don't need to feel in any shame. You didn't label yourself that. I just thought, and I said this to you just earlier, didn't I? That I can't think of another role in policing or another police officer who's able to say that what they do on a day-to-day basis reduces crime by 71%. And it's such a simple concept. You put a uniformed cop on a mental health ward or two mental health wards that you frequent, and actually tell us, what do you do there? How do you prevent that crime? What does that look like?
So what it looks like day to day is myself in uniform. I wear a slightly different uniform to what you see on the street. On the street, they wear a high visibility kind of like vest, whereas I wear a plain black vest. But I still have all my equipment with me. I have handcuffs. I do have a baton and my other bits and pieces. It's quite clear I am a police officer walking around. And I am open and approachable to not only the staff, to the service users. I'm walking around the wards, I'm engaging to people, I'm talking to people. And with the service users' permission, I started to engage with them during their own community meetings on the wards. So I sat down in the meetings where they raised their problems and concerns to the staff members, but I was there too, so they could ask me questions, and they could also bounce off me about their own concerns about what's happening on the wards to the staff. So it kind of gave them a little bit more empowerment to actually communicate to the staff. That's what I found anyway. And not only that, I was also with the staff during their staff briefings. So they would have safety briefings, safety huddles, where I would be involved, and they would talk about incidents that have happened over the night or the previous day if I wasn't in. And they talk about how they're going to manage those individuals. And I could obviously give some input in terms of my policing experience, but I think it also empowered the staff to actually go, we've got the police officer here, so we've actually got these options open to us in terms of how we can manage disorder on the wards. So yeah, it was all about being visible, being present, communication, talking, and more than anything, just being there for everyone.
Do you know what the service users' perception is of having you there? Do they feel, suspicious, Big Brother is watching you, or do they feel they welcome your presence there?
So at first, I have to say there was a few negative reactions. So on my first day, I walked into the ward and an informal service user saw me. I introduced myself. I said I'm going to be coming back every single day, and I'm going to be engaged, like talking to people such as yourself. Within 30 minutes, he self-discharged himself from the ward. There was a bit of some of the service users were quite wary. Why is there a police officer involved in mental health crisis care? And it's a very valid point. Why is there a police officer involved in mental health crisis care? I'm not a mental health professional. I've got no real stake in their care, their treatment, and their rehabilitation. But the feedback that I had over time was actually, I can actually say, excuse me, PC Harris, can I have a moment of your time? And we'll talk about absolutely anything, any problems they had. If they had a problem with, my landlord's looking to evict me, can you give me some advice? And although I know very little about tenancy law, I was just someone to bounce off those problems, those issues with, and then I could give some advice, saying these are the people you can contact for that, like, real specific advice. And when you break that barrier down, and when you walk onto the wards and they go, "Oh, hi, PC Harris," that's when things have turned around. That's when things have changed.
I think that person who basically jumped ship as soon as you arrived, I think that tells us more about them than you. But maybe just to give a bit of context, maybe some people are surprised that people can just discharge themselves, or that they have landlords. Can you just explain that situation a little bit?
So the mental health service that I engage with is a community acute mental health ward. So it's a mixture of those detained under Section 2 and Section 3 of the Mental Health Act, but it also includes those who are informal patients. So they are there voluntarily, and the mental health services, they always look at the least restrictive option. So if a person is willing to come to hospital for care, for treatment, and to engage with therapies, then they'll bring them in on a voluntary basis to have those services. So the least restrictive option is obviously the best option for the service user, because they're more likely to engage with those services. Now, sometimes the patient, they lack the proper capacity to make those kinds of decisions, or they are a danger to themselves or others, more often a danger to themselves in terms of they can't properly look after themselves or manage their lives effectively, so they need that extra help. Sometimes mental health services have to detain someone under the Mental Health Act to actually bring their treatment. So, for example, a person who suffers from psychosis stops taking medication out in the community, and they are in a state of psychosis as a result, then mental health services will look to bring them back to the ward, to bring them back up with their medication, to care, to treat for them, so that they can rehabilitate them, give them that independence to then send them back out into the community.
Yeah, so it's not every mental health ward is an enclosed facility where people are held securely, but like you say, there was a voluntary element here. We've got an interesting question from Joy, who's watching on YouTube. I've been a patient on a psychiatric ward. I was sectioned, so that means she did not have a choice over this at that time, and there was almost no violence on the ward. Were there reasons why there was so much violence on these particular wards? Interesting question.
That's an interesting question, and I guess it very much depends on the mental health services, the resources that they have available, the facilities and the states they have available to them. They all contribute to the environment. So it very much depends. You could be in a specialist facility, you could be on a community mental health wards where you have voluntary patients. Sometimes there is very little offending. So all it takes is one service user who is particularly challenging to upset the whole balance of a ward. So it's quite a dynamic of what actually is happening on the wards, and sometimes there have been occasions where there have been no reports for a particular ward for a period of a month or 2 months. But on another ward, there's a particular problem, and then the following on from that is it's reversed. So there's a problem now on this ward because of 1, 2, 3 service users, but there's very little issues on the other wards.
And who is it that is funding your role? Is it funded by the police or the mental health services involved in the financing of your role there?
So it's, I believe it's funding from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire. They're the main source of the funding. But they obviously, the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, they are funding schemes which are going to, or hopefully are going to, reduce crime anywhere. So mental health services they've approached the police service, the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's how my role is funded.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic concept because it's such a low investment, no offense in any way, but, to have one person on, visit these 2 wards and to have such an impact on what goes on there. Can you just talk us through a typical day? What does that look like? Because it's community policing on a mental health ward, isn't it?
So depending on the workload, if I had nothing planned for the day, so I would turn up at the ward. So I have an office based at one particular ward. So I would go from police headquarters. I would travel to the wards, say hello to all the staff first, because the service users normally they're just waking up at that time, and then I'll just wait for them to wake up, really. And
what time is that?
To be honest, some are early risers, some are late risers, but generally the first cigarette break of the day, where I say cigarette break, fresh air break, I should call it, really, where
really the opposite, isn't it?
So around about from 8:30, 9:30 is kind of like times where they can go outside, and they are let outside of the ward. So it's not like the exercise area, secure exercise. It's outside of the wards. It's outside of the hospital, where they can actually stretch their legs, go for. If they have certain Section 17 rights, they could walk to the shops and back. or if they're voluntary patients, they can go even further if they wanted to. But that would be kind of at the time whereby most would be up by then. And once a week there is a community meeting which happens after that, depending on which ward it is, and I try to be present for those community meetings where the staff, well, representatives of the staff sit down with the service users, the patients, and they talk about their problems. And I'm either stood in the background or I'm sat down with them, and I just listen in. I just listen into what kind of problems they're having, and sometimes I get questions myself. But generally speaking, it's just that presence of acknowledging that I'm about, which. So yes, moving on from there, there's a protected lunchtime period, which I try to give the patients and service users as much space and time as possible. So I retreat back to my office, or I start traveling to another ward. And in that time, I do my paperwork, I do my correspondence, and then into the afternoon time, I usually try and plan something for the afternoon. If I have to interview a patient regarding an incident, or if I'm talking to a staff about an incident, etc., I try and plan that for the afternoon, because that's the time they're most likely to be awake and alert. They've just had a protected rest time. They just had food, so that's the best time to actually catch up and speak to people. And then come the late afternoon, I head off back to headquarters.
And tell us about, so last time we spoke, you were talking about sitting down with some of the service users and, talking through the decision-making process, and how you're actually, one of the examples of how you're preventing violence. What does that look like?
So one of the things that I measure myself against is about trying to reduce crime, rather than trying to have outcomes such as convictions, cautions, or other kind of outcomes. So my role is to try and reduce the disorder on the wards, and that's how I judge myself. So I read some research about restorative justice, and I saw that they had a figure of around about 18% reduction in reoffending through restorative justice. And I thought,
sorry, did you say 80 or 18?
18. Yep. And I thought, well, okay, what is the harm of taking a pinch of that and bringing it into this role? So when I'm engaging with a service user who has committed an offence, and it's relatively minor, and it's something which we can deal with on the ward, rather than making it a formal or effectively informal process, we go through a restorative conversation with them. So I've got 4 key questions which I ask them, which I kind of ask in different ways depending on who the person I'm talking to. But in essence, it's, okay, talk me through what happens. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Next question is, what needs to happen to put things right? And then that's the last question, is what are you going to do differently next time? So we're taking them through those questions and trying to engage with the service user to reflect on their own actions, their own behaviours, and for them to come up with their own strategies about how they're going to deal with a similar situation in future. So that is, I've been using that an awful lot, restorative conversation, rather than any kind of formal process, and I'm seeing the results as come through. So I'm really pleased about that.
Well, you should be. I think that's amazing. I'm just going to mention very quickly here. Jim Nixon is saying, great work, well done, love the concept. Now, Jim Nixon is not just anyone, he's the host of the Community Safety Podcast. So he's got a very long-ranging background and a lot of knowledge about community safety, and I'm not surprised he's impressed by this. So for viewers from different countries where things might have different terms, so restorative justice is something that is offered to a victim and an offender. The offender must have admitted to the offense and may be incarcerated, but it's a supervised meeting between the victim and the offender. Professionals are about, for example, police officers who are trained in restorative justice, and it's an opportunity for the victim to communicate to the offender what their experience of the crime was, what the effect was that it has had, whether they're suffering from any traumatic after effects, and it's the opportunity for the victim to ask questions of the offender. And you might think that, why would offenders agree to this? But they do agree to this. And these meetings, they can have amazing effects. So the victims often feeling far less traumatized than they did before. Because imagine somebody broke into your house and you feel, your personal space has been violated. You don't feel safe at home anymore. You've got to, you think, oh my God, I'm so vulnerable. Why has this person chosen me? And in your mind, because it's abstract, you don't know the person, you haven't met them, they're this big, intangible monster, evil, scary creature. But then you might meet them in a restorative justice session, and they're just someone sitting hunched over, maybe a very sorry presence, and not that scary after all, now that you're looking at them, and they might explain to you why they chose your house. It's probably nothing to do with the victim, and that just makes everything a lot more tangible, and the victim is a lot more able to rationalize things. And so the trauma for the victim can be greatly reduced. And actually offenders who agree to restorative justice sessions have less reoffending in the future. So that's one thing. And what you simply, so it's very effective. And Jim Nixon was saying that as well, restorative justice is very effective and it should be used a lot more. And what you're doing basically in a sense as well is, you're doing community resolutions, aren't you? You're, rather than making everything formal, thinking, okay, how can we prevent this in the future? And, you're sort of coaching them through. You're not telling them what they should have been doing. You should have said this, you should have said that, but what could you do differently? Because if it comes from them, or even if they have the impression it comes from themselves, it's a lot more effective. They're more likely to do it. So it's a really, really good concept there. What do you think is this? How is this role seen in the wider concept of your force or your tri-force area? So Bedfordshire is collaborating with Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire. So again, for those who don't know, in the UK, some forces who are adjacent to each other, they sometimes collaborate some of the back office functions.
So it's with police officers, there is kind of like an underlying theme that we can categorize offenders in a very, very crude way. And it's very unconsciously put that offenders are either, they come from a sad background, they're either bad people or they're mad. So the sad, mad or bad. It's a very crude terminology. And police officers innately, they want to go after the bad people and they want to help people who have who struggle with their mental health, the vulnerable. They want to help the sad people because we want to help. You join policing because you want to help people. You join most public services because you want to help people. You want to make a difference, and it kind of goes against the grain for police officers to actually start investigating mentally vulnerable people. It goes against that grain of, I'd rather be out there catching the bad guys. I'd rather be driving around in a car on blue lights, going to a fight, separating and arresting the bad guy, arresting the domestic violence suspect, making sure that victim's safe, that child is safe, and delivering justice. Well, I say delivering justice, bringing that person to justice through the criminal justice system. So when it comes to you're dealing with a suspect or an offender who is mentally vulnerable, it goes against that grain. So the reception from other officers I found is very much, oh, I wouldn't do that. Oh, that's a right stinker of a job. And then you try to explain like what it's actually like, and they nod along, and in the back of the minds you can see that they actually he's doing a good job. I just don't want to do that because I didn't join the police to do that. So it's it's very mixed, but from our crime demand side of things, they absolutely love me because I deal with all those jobs they don't want to deal with. But I'm happy to deal with those jobs that they don't want to deal with, because I know I can help everyone in those situations. So it has had a very mixed reception, my role, in terms of fellow police officers. But obviously my force are very supportive of it. They actually see the results. They actually see the work that the mental health hub at Bedfordshire are achieving. So they're overwhelmingly happy and pleased for the work that we do.
I find it very funny that you say that the officers are saying that's not why they don't policing. Well, actually, it's about 80% of calls that come into police are actually mental health related, aren't they? So if they're out in the community, that's what they're going to be doing 80% of the time anyway, but maybe not making much of a difference. So how many people, how many service users have you got across those two locations that you're interacting with every day?
So, sorry, I was trying to think of an exact
roughly
number. I'll give you a rough estimate. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7. So it's about 6 or 7 wards. So it's around about just over 100 service users if it was fully booked, which often it is.
Right. Okay. So that's 100 people who, because let's think this through. It's 100 people who are having a positive experience with a police officer in a mental health context. Yes. So you're making a positive, lasting impression and potentially changing that person's maybe suspicious or negative or frightful perception of the police. For, possibly for the rest of their lives, because, many of them are going to go back into the community and they've had very positive interactions, productive interactions with police officers. Now, the other police officers who are out in the community, who want to go around arresting people, that's not what policing is about anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. And are they making this change in somebody's perception of police? I don't know. And quite likely, well, I say I don't know, but I'm pretty sure they're not. So actually, if you want to be a police officer, if you want to make a difference, if you want to reduce crime, then this is the perfect role, isn't it?
It's absolutely. This is, in terms of job satisfaction, this role has given me the most satisfaction out of all the roles I've done before. And I've done the glory jobs of being on response team, proactive tasking, neighborhoods in the busy town centre, but despite the kind of like results you have there, in terms of the day-to-day impact and the overall achievement, this role has been absolutely fantastic for myself. Yeah.
Now a bit of a downer. You've actually you're actually going to get promoted. You're actually a sergeant, and you're just waiting for a sergeant posting, aren't you?
So I'm not quite a sergeant yet. I want to be. So I've passed the exam, and I've got an interview coming up shortly for a new role. Hopefully I get that, which will be involved in developing student police officers in Bedfordshire, which I think is another fantastic role to get into, because you're shaping the future of Bedfordshire Police. These are young, fresh minds, young, fresh police officers, and you've got this chance to actually put this positive message with them that actually you can make a real difference, and this is how you can do it.
Yeah. So I think it's great that you move on, because as I told you, the higher up you get, the more of a change you can make, because you're making, okay, maybe not in your case because you've made so much of a change and difference already, but, as a sergeant, you'll have more decision power. Now, how is it going with potential recruits who are interested in your role?
Well, it's, so the other day I had a presentation to give over Microsoft Teams, which isn't the best way to deliver presentations, I have to say. But it was to explain the role of the mental health hub at Bedfordshire, which is myself as the crime investigator. We also have a street triage team. I don't know if you've heard of those before.
Well, explain for the viewers, please.
So we have a mental health street triage team who are is a team of one or two police officers, a paramedic, and a mental health nurse or a senior mental health practitioner. And if you can imagine the flow chain, we receive a call through our control room or ambulance control room that we have a person in a mental health crisis. That call will be filtered through. We have a dedicated mental health nurse who's in our force control room who can review that incident as it's coming through, and they can do a telephone triage assessment with that person if necessary. But sometimes it is necessary that we need to make an immediate response. So if there is a risk to life or safety of anyone, we've got to get out there quickly. So we've got a specially designed ambulance to take this team to anywhere in Bedfordshire. They all bring a specialist skill to the table. And the Mental Health Act it has its challenges in that the powers for the Mental Health Act, you need a police officer to do X, Y, and Z, but only a mental health nurse can do this part of the job. So if you put them all in one vehicle together, you can actually conduct those jobs, those assessments in very, very quick time. And they've taken a lot of job. I haven't got the statistics in front of me, but they've saved an awful lot of money from the taxpayer in terms of detaining people under Section 136 of the Mental Health Act, which obviously that's beneficial to the person in crisis or the mental health service user as well. The last thing you need is to be taken by force into a hospital when you didn't actually need to be. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, we have a paramedic. So often when we're dealing with people with mental health crisis, there is often a medical emergency as well. So we have a paramedic who's fully equipped with all the things that you'll find in a normal ambulance, who's there to actually deal with what they may find. So it's saved an awful lot of time and resources from both the ambulance service and the police service. And indeed, it's been very beneficial, much more beneficial for the service user, the end product, because you don't have those unnecessary interactions between a police officer in the street who's trying to decide, should I detain you under the Mental Health Act? Should I not? How should I approach? How should I talk to you? Well, hang on. Here comes a van. Out comes two officers who are specially trained police officers. We've got a paramedic, and we've got a mental health nurse who can take that job on and deal with it in a much more effective and efficient and economic way. So that's the street triage team in a nutshell. We've got the force control room nurses, and we've also got a nurse who's involved in our victim care services as well. So we have a mental health nurse attached to our victim care services. We call it Signpost Hub in Bedfordshire.
And what has been the level of interest in replacing your role for when you move on?
It's been a bit of a challenge, I have to admit. The officers that I speak to, they're very wary of taking on such a role. Again, it's that do I want to be that person who is investigating criminal offences of mentally vulnerable people? The complexities around the thought processes is the complexities around those crime reports, and it's not very appealing. So when I recently spoke to a class of student police constables and explained my role, what I do, they weren't very forthcoming about wanting to do something similar in the future. I guess everyone has their own picture in their mind of what they want to do, what they want to become in the police service, and maybe that was already with them when they're going through their training school. But no, none of them wanted to take over from me.
Okay, well, let's make this a big recruitment call. So we think that if you're a police officer and you want job satisfaction, you want to make a difference, you want to reduce crime, you want to help people, and you want to prevent crime, then apply for this job. So anywhere, if you're anywhere in the area of Bedfordshire or nearby, and also in your own police force, talk to someone about actually implementing this, share the link to this video. And anywhere around the world, if you don't already have this, here in Bedfordshire in the UK, it's one police officer on these wards, and it's working very, very well. I've got another question here from Joy. Is this likely to happen routinely on psychiatric wards, a police officer based on ward? My worry is the implication message given is that patients are violent or criminals, risks feeding prejudice. What is your take on that?
So I totally understand that perspective. I really do, because there was a large feeling about that when I first came onto the wards, that why do we need this police officer here? There is a perception that police officers, we're here to deal with violent people, with criminals, and sometimes we're viewed as not very nice people, uncaring people in some circles. So I totally, absolutely understand that perspective. And I would say that with the vast majority of wards, it probably, I say maybe not vast majority, but a lot of wards, it might not be even necessary to have a police officer, but maybe a police officer working in the background to work with staff, working with their data. So, Cardiff model of violence reduction, where they use the NHS data to actually plot the hotspots, actually have an officer sit down with them and go, these are your hotspots. This is what you can do. This is what you could change. And it is very hard to satisfy that worry until we're actually talking face to face, and we break down that barrier that actually you're another human who's actually here trying to help, trying to actually make this a caring environment, rather than being the atypical police officer who's there to catch violent thugs.
And I think a lot of that will also depend on your demeanor. And because if you come onto this police ward, wagging your finger and saying, I'm watching you, then yes, you're not making the best entrance. But if you're walking around saying, hi, I'm here for you to speak to if you've got any concerns, any questions. And like you said, you talk about things that are not even crime related with them as well. You're helping them with decision-making processes, and you're trying to make everyone feel safe. So you're there for everyone, and you're not there as this authority figure. It's like a CCTV camera or anything like that. You're actually there to support and help, and to have this community role, but in a confined space for a confined or very specific community. And so I think it's a lot down to the personality of the officer and their people skills, and that's probably something that's going to be very, very important. So I hope that a lot of police forces follow the example that Bedfordshire have set here. I hope that a lot of police officers with the right talent in people skills apply for the job that you're going to be vacating in a while. And I just wanted to see it replicated. So if anyone's watching this in the future, please comment below the video on your own experiences. Have you managed to get this changed? Have you managed to get this implemented? I don't know, Andrew, would you be happy to answer questions if people have questions about how this is set up? Could we?
Yes, I'd be happy to answer some questions. What I will add, just as a bit of reassurance, is my role is not to deal with directly disorder on the wards. So if there is an incident on the wards, that is for the clinical staff to deal with. I do not put hands on. I do not raise my voice. I can talk, I can engage, but that's not my role. I'm not there to do those kind of things. So obviously, if it went completely wrong, then maybe there is a justification for myself to become involved, but I'm there to support everyone. So I've certainly, in a whole year of being there, I have never had to put hands onto a patient. I've never had to raise my voice or shout or threaten at all. I've always been there as kind of like, I'm here to help you, kind of present.
Which is what policing is all about, really, isn't it? Okay. Any last, what if people only took one thing away from this conversation, with the UK's most effective cop, what would you want that thing to be? Just to make you blush again.
Oh, thank you. I think for policing, I would say you don't have to follow the criminal justice process blindly. The takeaway message is you have a whole tool set, you have a whole list of options that you can use to deal with a problem, a suspect of an offence. And you don't have to go down the line of we've got to charge them, we've got to send them to court. That's our role as police officers, is to prevent crime. That's the overriding Pelian theme, is we are there to prevent crime. We're there to keep everyone safe. And we don't have to keep on sending people to court. If we've got another option, which has got a chance of actually reducing that offending behaviour, because that's key. If we reduce that offending behaviour, actually our lives become a bit easier. So, let's actually use our tool sets. Let's actually think about problem solving rather than actually using the criminal justice system as a blunt tool to deal with offending behaviour.
There you go. Jim agrees. So with that, Andrew, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for everyone watching. I hope you found this interesting and inspiring, and I hope that there can be a ripple effect of this. And I really hope that it can be replicated and that this will raise an interest in this role. And it's such a simple idea and it works. Why not try it out yourself? So thank you very much for your time tonight, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. I hope you found this content useful. You can get access to each episode's transcript with key learning points, timestamps, and references if you get yourself onto my mailing list. Just go to the main website on policesciencedoctor.com, and on the bottom of each page you will find a sign-up form for notifications of new content. Just enter your first name, your preferred email address, and the type of organization you work for. You will not get any spam. This is just for me to let you know about new content and for you to get access to all the transcripts.